Hey everyone, I have a special treat for you today. I am here with Dean. He is the Faster Pass. He and I actually go back quite a ways. He was in the telecom industry back in the day, and actually one of my partners, Derek, and him are really good friends. And so Derek told me, he was like, "You have got to bring Dean on. He's one of the most interesting people in this industry." And we've been talking for the last 20 minutes now, and I absolutely agree already. Guys, he has a heck of a story to tell, and he's very involved in the things that are going on in the industry. And I think this is going to be a really special treat. So, Dean, it is a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to spending some time together and getting to know each other better. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, well, Dean, you've done a lot, all right? Like seriously, a lot. I've just been going through your Facebook and trying to figure out what are all the different things you've done in the last couple months. You've been to Alaska. We're at
Yeah.
the Iowa State Capitol. You did some out there. I also saw you in a robot suit. I know we'll talk about that later on what that actually means, but it was a slam capture, if I remember
Sure.
correctly. Yeah, so ultimately you have a lot of stuff going on. Really interesting. So do you mind just giving a little basic background history of where you came from and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a bit of a long story, so you might be able to tell by the stained glass window behind me. I'm a pastor of a church in the Chicago suburbs, actually in West Chicago, which is not part of Chicago. It's like 35 miles west of the city. So when I got out of college, I have two degrees from Purdue University, civil engineering and construction engineering. And I was working, managing heavy industrial construction projects. Did that for almost 20 years, oil refineries, chemical plants, and things like that. And the older I got, I go, wow, I really feel like I've neglected this spiritual part of my life. And I've been working hard, and I really enjoyed working with all the ironworkers, boilermakers doing that work. It was a fun group to work with, but I decided a little more than 10 years ago to leave that and spend more time because I think this part of my life, I go, I've been real busy, but I wanted to really give some time to this. So I was an opportunity to become a pastor of a church as I was growing in my faith in that and I did that and then we hit some really hard financial times. This building I'm in is 120 years old. Any building that old just requires a lot of maintenance and upkeep, and didn't have enough money to pay me and keep the church building up. So I'm going, well, what do we do? And so at the same time, I have been doing radio control classes. Drones were starting to become popular. That was 2014, 15, 16, and they weren't as automated as now. But I was worried about all the gaming going on, and so I said, "Well, I love radio control. I've been doing it since I was a kid, but everyone's gaming and they're not learning anything. So we bought a box of parts and put it in the basement of the church, and we had drone classes. Build your own drone from scratch, and so you had to figure out how to solder everything together, and we built drones here at the church and taught over the winter and taught people how to fly, and so that's how I wasn't quite in the industry yet, and then someone called me up, so I got known as the local drone guy, in the town. And one guy said, "Hey, I hit a tree, fell in a lake. Can you fix it?" I go, "Yeah, I'll look at it." And I fixed it, and it was my first manufactured drone. And the drones we were building, we were putting a GoPro on the bottom, and back then, pushing the button, you fly around and you look at your information and see what you got after you landed. And so this was my first manufactured drone that I had repaired that had an integrated camera. And so I looked at that and I go, wow, this is the quality of the photos and the video impressed me. So then the financial crunch here at the church going, well, we just don't have enough money to pay my salary and keep the building up and where the church was. So I started a drone business and got my Part 107 license. And then, like a lot of drone individuals, you kind of go, okay, well, what do I do? What do I focus on? And because of my connections in managing construction projects, I connect with people doing construction very easily because I know the work. I know because I've managed it for almost 20 years. And so I understand what they're doing. And I feel like in a lot of ways, people don't really appreciate the technical prowess needed to do all that work. So I really enjoyed doing construction documentation, videography, and mapping for construction companies because some of the work is just so intricate and so difficult, and it just helped. We're trying to show people, boy, this is what these companies do. This is what these workers are doing. So anyway, I did a lot of that. That was the first thing of where I started.
Okay,
So
awesome. And obviously, you and I, we met each other in the telecom side. That's where we met, and it was interesting because I know you were in the Chicago area, and you were known for doing rooftops, and that was the one that you always did. And you were very big about hitting those, which is interesting because all the other pilots in the country, we always avoided the rooftops. So if I could find a way out of it, I would. And you were always the guy who like enjoyed those ones. So really interesting.
I don't know if enjoyed was
Okay.
part of the reason is, with the church, I didn't want to travel as much. And so I would take a lot of the projects where I could be home. In any city this big has a ton of, or I should say, has a lot of telecom
Mhm.
infrastructure. So, and I'll give an example, like most Chicago public schools, or since a lot of Chicago public schools, had Sprint equipment on the
Mhm.
roof, right? Of the buildings. But to go in a public school, you have to get through the Chicago Public School background check because you're in the building when the children are there. So it can't be just anybody. And so I could commit to, I'll do that. I'll go through the background check and go up on the roof and gather that data. But it allowed me to be not travel as much and be home and because I'm doing some other stuff with the church. So I would arrange things that way
Mm.
and look for projects when they were in the area. We did, AT&T, T-Mobile, and then T-Mobile bought Sprint, was trying to integrate all their equipment. And I did other places too, but I ended up doing a lot of building, yeah, building not just rooftop, but anything like that. You had arrays attached to the sides of churches, some pretty interesting captures in a lot of intriguing places. There's telecom equipment on the two spires on Navy Pier,
Mhm.
and that's an icon in Chicago or a tourist location here. But I got to go out. There's no drones allowed on Navy Pier unless you're working there. So we went out and did that. So yeah, a lot of, but they're not easy. They're the access getting in. It takes a lot more time to do those. So there's
Yeah, it does make
a
sense.
cost to that. Yeah.
Yeah, telecom is interesting. I always love looking at pilots like on like Facebook and stuff. It gets a really bad rap. It really does by a lot of people. But you and I both know there's actually a lot of money in it. If you really put the work into it, there can be substantial income in it. And so I don't like the work. I don't, it's not something I ever want to do again necessarily. But, there is actually money to be made in that industry if you really commit to it and do it correctly. So, yeah, that's just one thing I really think is interesting in this industry. It gets a lot of really bad
I,
rap.
I think it's a good solution for the industry. For
Mhm.
example, a lot of these companies have gone through a 5G upgrade, but the technology's been around for a long time, cell phone equipment for 20 years, and a lot of it has been engineered and installed by contractors. And so the documentation of what's actually on the site, we want to put it in another cabinet or more antennas, that's not well documented. So we can go out, or anyone can go out who's not a telecom employee and build a 3D model and document everything that's there, and they can engineer a change or an upgrade to a site. So it's a way for other people to assist the goals of these companies so they can do things more quickly. Or if they had to send an employee to measure everything every time. So it was a good solution for what was needed. So I think it still is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely very viable, and the efficiency, the safety aspects are also really important. That's a huge thing here because a drone can really reduce those different risk. It's a huge risk mitigation tool that you can use for these different
Yeah.
industries, and the data it produces is phenomenal. It really, really is. So obviously, that side of the industry is never going to go away. I'm very confident in that. It's just really who is going to do that work with the drone. I think is going to be the big question mark on this. But as far as that side of the industry, I there's such an incredible synergy with drones and telecom. It's very obvious. So I say the same thing with windmill inspections and also solar panels. Like I think those and also transmission, right? Transmission,
Yeah.
telecom, windmills, and solar panels. I think those are the four things I think will never go away for drones, just because of how incredible of a tool it is and how much synergy it has. Does that make sense for you as well?
Yeah, well, and it makes sense. And there's other, the drone is really just a tool.
Yep.
And so one of the things the telecom industry needed is they needed data from the inside of their cabinets and
Yep.
the inside of their equipment. So you ended up, how do you open this? How do you document it? You know all that. And then we're using a ground scanner too. And when I started Telecom, there was no ground capture. And now the drone, most of the time, except on a rooftop, most of the drone capture is the easiest part,
Mhm.
I would say.
Yep.
The harder part is access to the site, access to the equipment,
Wasps.
and well, I should say harder. Yeah, and hazards. You
Yeah,
know,
I got you.
trip and
Uh-huh.
falling hazards. I've been on those buildings and there's no fall
Yep.
protection, and you're so how. Well, so I'm going, yeah, the drone is a great tool, but it's one of the tools
Mhm.
in the arsenal of gathering all this data to help these
Yep.
companies. And I'll give an example. I was part of a team. We trained about, I don't know how many it was, maybe between two and 400. It's been a while. Verizon technicians, because we've done enough of this, how to use drones. Now, they weren't climbers, but this allowed them, they just keep the drone, and they don't need a big one, but they could look at the equipment on the tower without hire a climbing crew. Go up,
Yep.
look at this, see what's there, how are the connections, how do things look. Now, back then, a climbing crew, if I remember right, was about $2,000 a day. It might be 3 grand a day. So if someone could check something and save the time loss and the cost of that, and safely, you don't have to always put a person up doing that. I think it's a great solution.
Yep.
So yeah.
That definitely makes sense. And I know that we originally got started with the surveying industry, and using like LiDAR for surveys is the same thing. It's the amount of time savings that you're going to get with these technologies are really, it's really the important thing. So I know
Yep.
I do Francis Tuttle, and I'm an instructor out there. My co-instructor is a surveyor, and some of the conversations we had was like, hey Tom, like what would a mile by mile survey of a densely forested area be? And he's just laughing. He's like, it's absurd. He's like, it would take two field crews about 2 weeks total to get accurate measurements if you're going to be doing highly forested mile by mile area. And a drone, you can do the entire capture in 4 hours. Like, it's wild.
Yeah, the ability to capture a lot of data quickly, and I think this is jumping ahead.
Oh yeah, you're
I
good.
think that's
Yeah.
one of the opportunities in the industry, because you can really, if you know how to use the software, you can gather a lot of data. But designing systems and APIs and webhooks to organize it for
Hmm.
you, all this information you can gather. And I'll give you an example. Well, there's an engineering company that has an office in Chicago, and they were hired to do a study. The city wanted to expand the Red Line, which is a train line that runs north out of
Hmm.
the city. Now they have construction permits that everything was built along the red line that runs north, but they're going, well, what if we want to expand this or add another parallel train line? Here's what we have to do. These buildings have to go, these properties, where if you had to pull up every construction permit, and what if someone built something that wasn't on a
Yep.
construction permit? You know what I mean? So this allows you to gather. I did it in a day. I mapped this whole corridor, which was miles long, so that ability to gather that, so people who are making decisions have good information to base their path
Yep.
forward. Yeah, that is just one of the strengths of the industry.
Yep,
Yep.
that definitely
Yep.
makes sense. So, what other like technologies and drones do you expect to see in the future? What do you expect? I guess where or let me rephrase this. How have technology with drones evolved over the last few years? There you. Let's do that. Let's do history back and like say what are the biggest advancements that have happened in drones to really accelerate this industry forward?
Yeah.
I think that's a good question, right?
When I started, there was very little accident avoidance, and the accident avoidance that existed. So you had very little help. So being the pilot, your skills needed to be high, your situational awareness, you needed to be aware of where can I get in trouble, where am I going to struggle, so all of those things. As the pilot, you're responsible for what happens. And so I had several Inspire
Hmm.
ones, no accident avoidance. I think I'm close to that tree. Well, if you hit the tree, your drone is coming, it's going to bungle up in the tree and come down, most likely. And so that has changed significantly, really, in a fairly short amount of time. I actually think that COVID slowed down some of the development because everything stopped for a
Okay.
while. But the evolution of integrated technology in the drone has shifted quite a bit. The other thing that's changed is the ability to have better and more sensor packages on a smaller platform. Being in the Chicago suburbs, I do a fair amount of work downtown, construction projects on the Chicago River, things like that. Bringing a big drone into a densely populated area is, well, I'd rather not have to do
Yeah.
that. But until fairly recently, if you wanted to do thermal capture, you had to have a big machine,
Hmm.
and now that has really changed. They've adapted these more cameras and more sensors on smaller equipment. So I think that has been a really nice change. And I'll give you an example. The I'm training and doing some work with the Skydio X10 right now. That is one of the best, I would say right now, that's probably the best thermal sensor I've seen on a drone. And so a lot of times, if you've done stitching of thermal imaging, boy, that was a struggle. You do it 80-80, didn't come out, 80-85, overlap, didn't come out. How about 90-90?
Yep, that's what we're
So
doing. 90-90 is our standard. I know.
yeah.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
And on the Skydio X10, you have the option to capture with the thermal camera. It's on the same sensor package. And I just forget to turn the thermal camera off. So I'm doing a map and I go, oh, well, I have these thermal images. Every one I've thrown in has stitched, and I wasn't even trying to do thermal capture.
Wow, that's
And
awesome.
that is a big move forward, because a couple of years ago we were just struggling, oh, go do it again,
Yep.
and it didn't stitch right, and so yeah, I think the ability to have better sensors in a smaller package that has more help for the pilot. And so I'm just being honest, every software package, every display has failed me somewhere in the field. So you're still responsible. You got to know the strengths and weaknesses. And if it fails you, are people put at risk? Is the drone put at risk? How are you going to manage that?
Yep.
So that is much more user friendly than when we started. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right
So
there with you, man. I know, like, the evolution that I've seen. I haven't been in this industry as long as you have by any means, but the Phantom now, like,
yeah,
oh
a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. No, I just mean I was doing
Right.
other
No,
stuff,
I'm with
right?
you.
I was wasting my time doing other stuff
Right.
before I found the real job in the drone industry. But so you have the Phantom 4. That was like the peak of the peak. That was the best of the Mavic 2 Pro platform. And then you moved over to the Mavic 3 Enterprise platform. And you can clearly
Right.
see each one of those drones is drastically better than the previous one. The Phantom 4 was a lot more bulky. It didn't handle as well, etc. Obstacle avoidance wasn't as clean. It was just really
Right.
bulky, right? And then you moved over to the Mavic 2, and you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. The camera isn't as good, but every other aspect of this drone is phenomenal. And then you have this new Enterprise, the Mavic 3 Enterprise, which is just phenomenal. And I cannot, in a good
Yeah.
conscience, recommend any other drone to anybody, just because, like, that package for,
Yeah.
for for the price, for the battery life, for the obstacle avoidance, for the sensors, like, it is just ultimate perfect for what you're looking for. I haven't had the opportunity to play with the X10 yet. I've heard good things. I really do want to, but yeah, I mean, it's really
Yeah.
really cool
There's
how that's happening.
there's
It's phenomenal. It really is.
yeah. Yeah, it's in pretty high demand
Hmm.
now. So right now, it's just out. Yeah. So I've been doing a lot of training on that
Yeah,
platform.
yeah.
Yeah, but I would say that right now, and this is moving in this direction right now, there's no one drone that does everything, but you're getting more and more opportunities in the same, in smaller platforms, and even DJI is doing that
Yep.
too, right? So on the Phantom 4, right, they gave you a mechanical shutter, but they took it away, right?
They
They took it
did,
away
yeah.
on the Mavic. Oh,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So now, if you want a mechanical shutter to do mapping, well, you got to buy an Enterprise. Yeah, so it's interesting, some of the evolution. Yeah, so you saw on the Phantom 4 Pro, the video quality was a little better than on the Mavic. Same size sensor, right? Same size camera sensor. What you were limited by was the computer. Just couldn't handle the video bitrate from the Mac. So they okay, we can't give you as much bitrate. So that's what they fixed on the Mavic 3. Same size sensor, same 1-inch sensor,
Yeah.
right? But you're getting more video throughput. Yeah, so on that.
It's
So
interesting.
yeah. So there's so many, but that's helping so much. You see, the accident avoidance has improved in all of these, where before 5 years ago we had very little. So it's getting more robust. Yeah, so helping your average you, where now you don't have to be a savant to not hit anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, with my Inspire 1, I remember I was filming for the high school right behind us here. I was doing it. And I had my Inspire one out and pretty comfortable with my piloting skills. And I'm looking at that pretty close to that big oak tree, and then how close am I? And the propeller tip just hit the tree and then thump, clopped on the ground. I was too close to that oak tree.
Noted.
So that was a while ago.
Yep.
Yeah, noted. Noted.
Yeah, absolutely. If we've all, I'm sure. How many Phantom 4s have you crashed? I know I've crashed 2. So yeah.
Oh no, I think I went through 4, but
Oh
that
my
was my own
gosh.
fault. And there's what I would call a design weakness on the Phantom 4, especially version
Mhm.
1. The battery has a clamp top and bottom, and I was doing a ton of mapping, so you change battery, slam it in, and I got in a hurry, and this is, do a good job setting up your aircraft, and so I would get in a hurry, and I would slam a new battery in, and the bottom latch wouldn't quite engage, but it looked like it would go up and fly, and for about 10 minutes, and the battery would vibrate out, the drone would
Oh my
crash to the ground.
gosh.
Yeah, so I went through 4 of those before. What am I doing wrong? And
Wow.
so not a design flaw, but a design
Okay.
weakness. But that was me understanding, not being in a hurry, setting up the aircraft correctly for how it's made. And every aircraft has its
Mhm.
little idiosyncrasies that you have to be careful of. Even full-size aircraft. Every pilot knows strength of the aircraft, weakness of the
Mhm.
aircraft, things as the pilot I need to watch.
That
Yeah,
does make a lot of
yeah,
sense.
yeah. The Mavic 2, gosh, used the death out of that, aircraft. Yeah, it's for the size, did so
Mhm.
much. And I actually, for telecom work, and I know people are using RTK now for that, but the point of interest feature on that was so friendly for what we were doing. And once you learn the settings, it just worked. Yeah,
I love my Mavic 2 Pro. It was a monster. I crashed it 3 times and
yeah,
it kept flying. Like it was great. I actually had to give
yeah,
it. I had to
yeah.
actually have to give my Mavic 2 away to somebody because I knew it didn't have long left, but I also didn't feel in good conscience like enough to sell it. So I gave it to a buddy with the condition that I don't know how long it's gonna last. Well, it's been about 2 years since then, and he's still using it. It's a monster drone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have 3 of them, and I have one I still use on occasion. It's smaller than the Mavic 3 to travel with, and the other, I've used the other ones enough. Like it was my main drone for telecom when I was doing more of that than I am now. You could take it with you, pack it up, put it in your backpack up on a rooftop, But I've used it enough where I'm having some problems which aren't repairable with the original 2, but I just want one that still works just in case.
It's fun. I love it.
Yeah, such a good machine.
Yeah, yeah. Using the right equipment is really important. Obviously, you got to understand what your limitations are, and that's something that's pretty funny. We're running into because I'm in the roofing industry now. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that or not, but we're really hitting the roofing industry really hard, and it's funny
Yeah,
because a lot of the roofers I'm working with are essentially using outdated equipment, not generating the results they're
sure.
wanting. And then they're like, oh, yeah, drones suck. And they move on with their lives. And it's
Right.
funny. And because they're trying to use like a Mavic, an Air 2S to try to get inspection data, which is just not going to happen as well. And then one of the industry standards right now is using a Skydio 2 Plus. That is the drone that a
Yeah,
lot of people are using for it, but it doesn't hold a candle to like a Mavic 3 thermal. And the differences that you can produce with that are just phenomenally different. So what I do is a lot of times I do a side by side comparison, and they take their Skydio 2 or their Air 2S up, and I'll put the Mavic 3 and I'll put on that 56 times zoom and zoom into every single one of those rocks and the shingles. And they're like, what? And I'm like, you're not using the right equipment for the job. Like, if you really want that high resolution detail, you have to use the right equipment. And it's just interesting how that works. So,
yeah. Knowing strengths, the Skydio 2 Plus, it's a great value if you know what you need to
yep.
do with it. And there are people here using that in Chicago. Here, I know a company still using it. It's a good
Hmm.
for your use case. Accident avoidance works really well. For when that drone came out, the old
Oh, yeah.
S2, the accident avoidance was groundbreaking. Was that
Yes.
2018? Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
2018,
that was
2019. It
great.
was
Yeah,
phenomenal. This was the
yeah,
top of the line drone,
yeah.
but it's been a few
Yep,
years and there's
yep.
other ones out there now. So,
Right,
yeah, it is
right,
what it is.
right,
So,
right.
yeah. So, what do you think the trends in the industry are? Where do you think we're heading?
Well, when I started, there was a lot of contract work available, and it seems like the current trend is for owners to be training people, training their own employees to use drones as a tool. And so we're seeing more and more of that. Here's a drone platform, and I'm doing some of that. Okay, let's help set up a drone program, show you what's out there. Let's look at your use case and do some training on these platforms in your work
Yep.
environment. And that's probably my preference of working with a client is let's train your people on skills and using this in your work environment and pick out equipment that works really well for you. So I'm seeing that trend. So, of that, and that's been for a while. Even training the Verizon technicians, we were doing really inventory in the telecom industry, and then we saw Verizon wanted to train their own people, and I'm seeing that trend continue. At the same time, here in our area, there is a contract company providing inspection data for not all, but a lot of the power company assets. And they're using a contract company for that. So we're kind of seeing both happening. And I'm not sure, a lot of things go in cycles. So we go, oh, let's have our own employees do it. And we don't want all our employees doing only that. So what's the balance? And so some companies, I was out of the country last week, and they have a dedicated drone team.
Mhm.
This company out of the country, that's all they do. And there's a company in North Carolina, same thing, dedicated drone team, inspection team. And then some companies are saying, well, it's a tool that stays in the truck for when they need it. And so companies have to learn, how do we want to manage this as a process, as a tool for our employees.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I agree. I'm right there with you. I feel that shift moving as well. And that's why we've really moved away from the DSP side ourselves, and we're moving away and going into the education, training, consulting side of it, because I know a lot of companies are getting very eager to build their own programs out. And there's a lot of opportunities right now on going to an established company and saying, "Hey, let's build you something that you guys can own your own equipment, own your own teams, and really have that quality control." And that's the big thing. The quality control is what I've noticed is the biggest thing about this. It's not really the cost, it's just making sure that the data that they produce, they know it's consistent and it's right every time.
Yeah, and developing profiles that give them consistently good
Yep.
data. I'll give you a practical example. Most of the bridges in America were made a long time ago. Our infrastructure is fairly 60s, 70s, 80s, right? You don't see a lot of new bridges going up now. So a lot of it what's the integrity of this
Yep.
bridge? So say we want to look at all of our bridges for the Department of Transportation, whatever your state you're in. So we have an idea where we are. Where should we dedicate the amount of money we have in the right place? Well, every bridge is different. It's a unique design for this unique case. It can be suspension. It can be it's a beam depth is different. So to capture data consistently, how do you have a flight profile that gives you consistent data if you're going to map a bridge,
Yep.
and that's a process. So if you're just going to send people out and do this, well, I can't see, it's dark in the pocket between the beams, I can't see this too well. The engineer can't see that to have good data. So how are you going to set this up? That's still a little bit of science at this point.
You're 100% correct, and I agree with that. And it's
Yeah.
also the speed as well. I like to empower those teams that are on site, right? They understand their projects, they know what they need. And I mean, we both can probably attest the drones are not that hard to fly. They really aren't, right? So like,
Yeah.
at some point we have to recognize that these tools are becoming very accessible for everybody. And
Right.
especially, and again, I go back to it, that Mavic 3 platform. I'm so impressed by it. But that little box, you throw it in your truck and you take it out when you need it, and the contractor or the roofer or the construction hand, whatever it is on site, can just put it in the air, get the data they need, and get immediate feedback. That's powerful.
Right.
It's really, really powerful. And like, I honestly do think that in the next, 2, 5, 10 years from now, I think that every single truck will have, like in a construction industry or roofing or whatever it looks like, is going to have a drone in those vehicles, and it will be just right next to the hammer. Like it's going to be that important for everyone to just have that accessibility, and it's just an extension of what they're already doing. Data is key. And is that you're on the same page on that?
Well, several different threads
Oh yeah,
there.
yeah. I'm sorry.
So,
I got
yeah,
off in a whole thing there.
yeah, there's a whole bunch of things. I be honest, I like the Mavic 3, but I don't know if it's the right machine for bridge mapping.
Yep, makes sense.
It does a lot. So I'm going, well, if I'm going to be
Yeah.
It's very GPS dependent. If I go underneath a steel
Mhm.
structure, so I'm going, we have to look at the aircraft. Is this
Yeah.
the right aircraft? And I have a Mavic 3, and they're like everything has right now, there's not one thing that does everything. A
For
lot
that,
of
just to clarify, what would you recommend if you were to go and do a bridge inspection underneath it? What would that be for you? That's not as GPS dependent.
Well, yeah, so it depends on what your deliverables are.
That's
So
fair.
we need to work backwards and just say, okay,
Yeah.
what do you want for that? What do you mean?
Sure.
What are we trying to do? I did work with a Midwestern company for what they wanted to do was their Department of Transportation, one state, it was a state DOT, they wanted to inspect their bridges. And I go, okay, what part of the bridge do you want to inspect? They were concerned about the bridge bearings. Bridges expand and contract,
Okay.
temperature. And so I'm going, well, you end up in a GPS denied environment. And I'm going, just being honest, the Skydio S2
Mm-hmm.
Plus, this is a good drone for that.
Yes.
It's a reasonable cost. Get under here. It's got good accident avoidance. And it has a visual system. Get in here. That's a good solution for you guys. So it's in. There's an old saying, and this isn't a drone saying, but in the aircraft industry, is that the right aircraft is the least aircraft that'll do the job. But it depends on. So I think it's probably a better habit to what's the data I'm trying to
Yeah.
deliver and pick the aircraft for that. If I'm trying to map a whole bridge section across a river,
Yeah.
which is so Mavic 3, right? I need to get underneath and have the camera point up.
Yep.
Problem for the Mavic 2. It's right. So is that so I'm not saying hey, it's a great machine, it's a reliable machine, but
Yeah.
not the right machine for everything. So yeah.
Yeah, and, and,
Yeah.
and, and that
And
is
and
absolutely
that's
true.
what I
Absolutely true.
yeah, I had the M210 RTK. You can put the camera on top, but now to go under a bridge, that's a big expensive setup under a bridge. So I like that we have some smaller options. Yeah.
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 No, that definitely
So
does make sense, and it's all great points to bring up. It really, you got to work backwards, like you were saying. Like you have to go, what is your end state? What are the challenges? Now let's find the right tool for that job. And every time you put that drone in the air, you do have a risk. So you have to also think of like,
right.
what's the wear and tear on that equipment? What's that risk? I actually had someone try to do telecom inspections, and they bought an M30T, and he was wanting to use the M30T for telecom. I'm like,
Yeah.
why? Like,
Yeah.
I just don't
Yeah.
understand
Right.
why you would put that really expensive drone that's not
Right.
designed for that in the air for that. So I was like, just get an $800
And
Mavic
that's
3 Pro and call it
yeah.
good, or Mavic 2 Pro.
Yeah, and that's you can anytime, and not just drones,
Hmm.
videography, you can do that. I think cameras are cool, and I one of the hardest problems for these smaller drones is high dynamic range, right? You got sunset. I'm gonna get a picture of a sunset. We got these small little lenses. I'm trying to capture this bright and dark. So I'm going, oh, I'd really love a full frame camera, on a drone. So I got a big sensor and a real big glass elements to capture this beautiful sunset. But it's not my business. I don't capture sunsets for a living. But part of me wants that, so I get a good picture of the sunset. So it's easy to spend money, get excited about
Hmm.
equipment, and spend money on stuff that you don't have a use case for. And that's even not just with drones, just cameras. There's so many good cameras out now.
Yeah.
So many good, that do video, and you can spend a lot of money. And so yeah, I think again, what's my deliverable? Pick your equipment, work your case backwards, and to be able to deliver what you need. So yeah, I think if you're going to be in the industry, you need to think about what can you make connections with. So not just do I know a lot about construction, but I appreciate what those companies do. Like people working in an oil refinery,
Hmm.
right? Every time you drive your car, you're dependent on all those people who work at the oil refinery. If you have a car that uses gasoline, right, or a diesel truck, right, or if you had a diesel truck delivered your food, people working at the oil refinery and all those people keeping that running, you're dependent on them. I appreciate all that, and I go, wow. So yeah, I think the ability to display that, that's a good thing.
Of
So
course. Cool. So such interesting conversation. I love this. I absolutely love this, Dean. I cannot stress enough. So thank you
sure,
so much again for coming on. This is great. So we talked about those. So what are the biggest challenges that you think the industry is going to be facing as far as like that are facing today or will be facing in the future? What are the biggest challenges you see?
Like I said before, I appreciate that things are moving forward. I think one of the challenges is as people learn to use this technology, people underestimate. I mean, you know, from working in industry, you could, once you get proficient at it, once your skills are up, you gather a lot of data really quickly. I've done about 1,000 wind turbines. You'll take 4,000 pictures in a day. Boom, 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 boom. And they all look the same. The blades are gray, blade ABC, and go, where are they all? So how do you organize all that so it's easy to underestimate how much time you spend, take the data, get the data off the drone, upload the data. So I think one of the challenges, and I'm actually recommending this as a career field, is data management for people. How to help people take this information, design profiles from start to finish, where I get the data and it goes. This is a great use for AI, right? And here's a little bit of the hard part. Say you're doing wind turbine inspections. There's 3 blades, right? Well, which one's A, B, and C? Which blade is it? There's a crack in this blade. Can I make that automated where I upload the photos and it can automatically, by the geotagging, know it's this turbine, know it's this blade. I can just upload them and the AI does that for me. That's someone understanding the industry, understanding the capture, and having people who can program this where the person doesn't have to organize all that. In a lot of those, even roofing, right? That the capture is good, helping people get a capture where it organizes and makes the data flow seamless. Because as more and more people start using it, how to organize that information where it just happens automatically. So I think that's one of the challenges for the future as the drones improve. And to be honest, good drones aren't that easy. You need good hardware and really good software.
Yeah.
Developing a good, reliable, consistent drone system is not that easy. It's a very difficult thing to have to, you and I are gonna come out tomorrow and make our own drone company. To it. Yeah, it's hard.
True.
So,
It
yeah.
makes sense. And the data side is actually a huge part. And I'm really glad you brought that up because I know in the telecom industry, it was all about volume. And like you said, you take a lot of pictures. Well, that's a lot of data. And how do you get that data from where you are now out to where you need it? That's a big thing as well.
Right. So we would talk about, do you do your packaging on site, which I did most of the time because I drove, and if I'm going on a roof, I want to make sure I got everything before I leave. So I would get my laptop out, pull the data. Some of the data's on the phone, some of the data's on my iPad, some of the data's off the drone, pull it all together, put it in different folders. How long did that take? And then have to go home and upload it. What if that could all happen? And it could even check it. Hey, the breaker photo is blurry, where I didn't have to look at every photo. You know what I mean? That the client had good information. So, or you forgot the photo of the anchor, of the top safety climbing anchor, whatever it is, that somewhere it would check all that. I think that would be a huge improvement. But to do that, again, someone needs to program it and know the flight profile and have an AI way to check all those things. I saw that when I started wind turbine inspections, we were doing all manual flying, which I actually enjoyed because I like flying. But by the time I left that, the flying was all automated, which is impressive. Someone designed a waypoint system for every wind turbine. It would align the drone with the turbine, stop it, and it would fly each blade. Now here's the other challenge. The camera didn't know what it was pointing at.
Okay.
Had to do that.
Oh.
Person had to point the camera. Is the exposure right? I got the bright sun. I'm looking at the bottom side of the blade. Is the exposure bright enough? So can AI do that? And that's the part that hasn't quite caught up. It's caught up in some ways, like on your phone. The camera works really well. 90% of the time, it can do all that, and you don't have to adjust it. On a purchase, say you buy a Sony A7R4, that's a high-end full-frame camera. There's a lot to understanding how to operate that camera. It's not all automated. There's a lot to get it. So can AI jump in? And that's probably one of the weaknesses because that's with your visual eye, you can see exposure's wrong, white balance. Actually, you can tell, like right here, right now, the lighting here, I probably look a little green, right? Because of these lights here, so because that's because of the lighting in this office is old, in the church building. So
I like to think of like a lot of the smaller, like, what is it called? Like the more, there's a lot of tasks that will be able to be automated in this industry. There's no doubt about it. But there will always be companies and different clients who need the right data, like done correctly by a human. I still think that's always going to be a requirement no matter what. So I like to
right.
think of when I talk to some of my students and things like that, I'm like, find something and be the best at it. And if you can do that, you will never run out of work. You agree on that?
There's a verse it's in the book of
Okay.
Proverbs in the Bible. It says, "You find a man skilled in his work. He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men." And
I like
that's
that.
part of the thing that's helped me to be successful is I do something and I become good at it, and I do it enough where I become skilled at it. And then you need to look at the skills I have. Is it something my client needs and is helpful for the deliverables I'm getting? So you got to figure out what that is, for you,
Hmm.
for each individual. But yeah, I think those needs are just glaring to me to help customers and clients organize this information, find it so it's useful. Some of these, I was at a team in California, power company, Southern California. We were trained, I think we had a dozen people in the training. So you have a dozen pilots gathering data.
Okay.
That's a lot of data. So how do we organize that and make it seamless where those guys are gathering data and they don't have to spend 3 hours of every day. Yeah, this is this poll, documenting each one where that just happens. I think
I think the most opportunity, like you said, is the data collection or the data analysis, the data processing, the interpretation, all the organization. I think that is really the side of the industry that has the most potential. I
yeah,
think, I think that's where it's at. I think if you really, really become the best at the data analysis inside of it, you're never going to run out of work. I don't know about you, but I have a guy that I use for my data analysis, my data interpretation. I have a
yeah.
guy, and
Well,
that's who I use, and he is the best.
right.
And I will always make sure he has work because anything that I do, I'm going to be going to him for it, and even for consultations or delivery or hey, like I talked about earlier, I had a geo-reference issue I
Yeah,
had yesterday, and I actually hit him up today, and I was like, hey, dude, can you help me? So
sure.
yeah.
Sure. And implementing some of the
Mhm.
technology is, where does this fit? Doing as the LiDAR sensors become less expensive, some of the stuff we're
Yeah.
using, like we're using a Navis harness, which is not a drone, but you walk around, you mentioned that earlier, to scan construction sites. As those become more affordable, you can gather more information. Say you got a commercial building with a boiler
Mhm.
room that serves a campus, but it's so old they have no CAD drawings for it. You can walk through with this. You don't need a drone. You can walk through with this scanning equipment and give them a fully 3D mesh that the engineering company can plan an upgrade for them, quickly, easily, and yeah.
Yeah.
So that the opportunity to use the technology to help things be cost effective, document that. I think there's just lots of options. But so it's it's engineering, it's knowing it enough where you can recommend it and what's a cost effective solution. So yeah, I think there's opportunities in engineering integration, programming, yeah, making all that work together, you
Bingo.
know.
Exactly what I
Yeah,
mean, I'm so happy you said that. It's the geospatial data and building it all together, integrating it all. So like I like using satellite data with aerial, like fixed wing aircraft, with drone data, which, with your iPad Pro going around getting LiDAR scan on terrestrial side, like all of it merged together. And that's like people get too caught up, I think, in the drone side and understanding that this is a tool in a bigger
right.
ecosystem, and it's understanding all the different intricacies, and it's yeah.
Right, and so on, and there's if we're honest, there's kind of a romance thing for flying. I still fly fixed wing aircraft for fun. I actually think there's more of a challenge because there's no GPS in the ones I fly, so it's all you. You're the
Yep.
pilot. So I was flying last night. I enjoy that, for fun, but because you can stop and gather data and hold position and do automated routes, drones do a lot for you, but it's still just a
Mhm.
tool, and partially to help focus people on where does our energy, effort, and resources go. Most of the drones right now don't do any work, right? So they don't do any work
Yeah.
tasks. There's some that do. Most of the time, we're taking pictures of existing conditions. Why? That's to help people know what to
Yeah.
focus their efforts on, how to repair. Is this bridge in good shape? Where do we go? Where's the leak in the roof? Or thermal scanning. One year we did all of the Walmart distribution centers. They all have refrigerated sections. We're looking for leaks in the refrigerated sections. We did that across the Midwest. One good use of thermal data, trying to go, is there something wrong with this big facility where they could save energy? A good use of that. But yeah.
Yeah, and then that's interesting because like I talk about multispectral quite a bit because one of my best friends he's like really big into multispectral, so we nerd out a lot on that side of it, and it's really interesting because it's multispectral data as a whole is useful to gather insights. It's just a portion of the bigger ecosystem, and it's just interesting. So yeah,
Right. So we're really a service provider for telecom. We're documenting existing conditions so they can do repairs or really most of the time do an upgrade or document the site for the next upgrade. Wind turbine inspections, you're looking for conditions, you're looking for cracks, you're looking for the integrity of the blade. So if there's a problem, crack any bigger than last year, a team can go in and fix it to focus their
yeah,
efforts. So how do we make that easy for the people who have to focus their limited resources? Only so many people that they're focusing on the most important things. So how to make that easy for them? So yeah, as that those teams managing
makes
those
sense.
assets.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, yeah, all incredible, and we can talk for hours on this one topic. We really could.
sure.
I do want to move on to the regulatory stuff. I know there's a lot of things that are happening as a whole, like FAA and just different regulatory guidance. So, how do you think regulatory frameworks are really impacting the adoption and innovation in this sphere? The different things the FAA is requiring, or local constraints, things of that capacity.
Yeah, I've seen the FAA really, and I working with several customers who seem to be on the cutting edge of doing remote operations near airports, or doing remote operations where. So I've seen that in states where there's very little flight or risk to real aircraft. So it seems like the FAA is doing really well. If a company shows a robust protocol, they can do this safely. That they're saying, okay, let's develop a protocol to do this. And I think I'm seeing a lot of good incremental steps. Here's how we do this, here's how we notify, and here's how we protect real aircraft. And so I think that's moving forward. And that's not the main place I'm
Sure.
involved. I'm kind of observing that. So there's probably other people who are better informed
Yeah.
on that. So I see that, well, the FAA, I think, is doing really well. My interactions with the FAA when I first started out, honest, they were super helpful. It was in the beginning, it was confusing. Do I do this? Do I do that? And I had some of the FAA reps reach out and coach me a little bit. So from what I've seen, I've been very impressed by what they've done so far. I've seen a lot of confusion about who has jurisdiction on municipalities, and so I try to get in front of that. If I know I'm in a very public area, I'll call the police ahead of time. I'm going to be filming here. This is legal. Had an incident with the Chicago police, which, hey, this guy, he's doing this here, come get him, And they had to respond. Someone
Hmm.
called and they sent a bunch of police cars. What's this? I never, so I think there's
Yeah.
opportunity for municipalities to understand and regulate, on the local level that it's regulated on a federal level. But I haven't really had a problem there. So I think that's moving at a good at a good
Yeah.
pace from what I see. But that's not the main area I'm in. I'm involved a lot in data acquisition, and right now, most of my business is helping to set up drone programs, select equipment, and train people in using it in their work environment. I don't want my preference would be not it's not just do a classroom training. Let's show your people how to use the equipment in a safe environment. and let's take it out and use it in your work environment for data capture and develop that together. So I enjoy that
I
process.
like that. So
So
let's talk more about that specifically. So when it comes to, I know we had a conversation before this actual call happened, and you talked about
mhm.
essentially how you like the mentoring process. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I think flight from a responsibility point of view, and actually I did this goes back to my high school classes. Before I had a drone business, I was doing these classes with high school students to have them have an experience with building something, but we were building drones that had no GPS, you know. So they had accelerometers so the drone would level itself out, but it had no GPS. So any wind it's carrying it. Oh, why did we do that? Well, it was cheaper, one. And the second part was you had to learn to fly the drone all the time. And almost every drone I've flown, actually everyone, Mavic 2, Mavic 3, Phantom 4, Sky, everyone has lost GPS. You know, you fly downtown Chicago, you land between in these pockets of all these buildings, all the satellites drop out, and the wind has taken the drone somewhere. So, and every software package has, no matter what it is, you know, DJI Go 4, DJI Fly, has shut down on me, or my tablet's overheated in the sun, and now it's on you. You have to fly the drone without all those features operating, and you're responsible for that. So with that, my preference was to train people in a safe environment. So with the high school students, we were training without GPS. So the drone is drifting all over because that's what it does without GPS. So you have to learn to. So it's kind of like an analogy is if you're learning to drive a stick shift, a car, if you can drive a stick shift, you can drive the automatic, right?
Yeah.
So, and go back and forth. And so if we can, and some pilots already have that experience. And so part of the training is knowing the strengths of your equipment, what it's capable of, where it's likely to not perform as well. You know, in telecom work, the drones were surprisingly good, right? Any of the antennas, you get right up close, right up in
Mhm.
front, no problem. Get near a microwave emitter.
Yeah, instant gone.
Yeah, yeah. Where are they going? What happened? You know, the drone I got nothing. I got no control. So to know that, you know, hey, I see a microwave emitter. I'm going to climb the tower with the drone on the far side. You know, so I think for right now, and eventually, as things get more and more automated, you know, there'll be more and more help down the road. But right now, you need to know what's going to work. How am I gonna know as the pilot, as the person responsible, that this is not going to. I'll give you another
Hmm.
example. I got hired to map a brand new high rise building in Chicago with the DJI drone. They had actually installed the glazing wrong. It was 830 feet tall. And the contractor, the ceiling between all the glazing, they didn't put that in correctly. And so the contractor said, okay, we fixed it. Well, the guy who was paying for the building said, I want documentation that this is fixed. Right. So I'm going, well, I'll buy the parachute system because I'm flying over people. Oh, because of the sidewalk, you got to fly around downtown Chicago. I bought the parachute system. I got a waiver from the FAA to fly over people with the parachute system in Chicago at this location. And I go, well, this will be easy. There's mapping software. It'll just map vertically, go up, go down. No problem. I'll just stand there and watch it while it does that, right? So I pull the drone up to the building and it should be going up. I know the drone should be climbing 830 feet, going over and mapping, taking pictures as it goes, but it's not doing that. It pulls up to the building and it starts flying towards the lake, Lake Michigan. And I go, well, what's that? Software, automated software. Doesn't say anything, right? So I bring the drone back, set it down, restart the drone, restart the software. Check this. Well, it's an 800-foot tall steel structure.
Okay.
The compass on the drone was misbehaving because of all the structural steel. The software was not designed to tell me that,
Okay.
but I knew what the drone was supposed to be doing. So this particular drone, I had to fly it manually, 800 feet up, 800 feet down, because that was the only one I had approved on this parachute system, you know. So we flew it manually while the compass was misbehaving, and I was able to do it. And you get down near the bottom, all the satellites start dropping out because you're near in the pocket between all the buildings. So yeah, but that's why mentored learning, I like to show people this is the strengths of this machine. These are the weaknesses. This is how the software works. Are we going to identify all that? But what we are trying to do is when something goes wrong, if you fly enough, something's going to go wrong. No one's put at risk.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, you can react. If you have to, put the drone down, but there was no situation came about where people were put at risk in the process. That's our goal.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does make a lot of sense. So what else do you have going on right now? Anything else? Any other thing you want to talk about as far as any current projects you want to discuss or anything of that capacity?
Well, one of the things I'm doing is I've moved in a direction. I've done telecom work, did wind turbine inspection, done a lot of mapping. I've tried a lot of different things, and I enjoy the training, mentoring from because it's a good time to come into the industry. I like saying, let's look at your program and see how this would help. And so what I found is on my existing company name, it doesn't really convey anything about training. So I'm just starting to deploy a new website and just same people, but with some partners who are focused on training. So if you haven't seen it yet, I've just haven't quite, it exists,
Okay.
but I haven't quite deployed it yet. But it's UAS Flight, UAS, Unmanned Aerial Systems, UASflight.com. So I'm just putting that out there probably in the next couple of weeks. It exists now, but I'm going to put some new
Okay.
media up to focus on how do we help companies set up a drone program, pick out some equipment, and if you want, we'll go out with you and teach you, develop a profile for doing your data capture with you, But yeah, I'm just in the process of doing that right now.
That is awesome. Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that because I agree with you. That is the direction of the industry, and I am like you. I find a lot of joy and passion in teaching. I think just teaching people how to do this job is so rewarding. And yeah, I think this is where a lot of opportunity is in the industry. So let's talk more about like your personal experiences and things. So do you have any for someone who's just getting in this industry, right? Someone who is dabbling into it, what sort of advice could you give to someone?
Well, what do you mean
Yeah,
by
no.
getting into
So
the industry?
let's
So
say they're,
let's define
yeah,
that
that's
because that could mean a lot of different
totally
things.
fair.
Yeah.
Let's say I actually have someone in my class right now. And he wants to go find something in the drone industry to where he can move from what he's doing currently in a corporate world and move into doing something crazy like us. What would, what is some advice you would give to him?
Did a lot of mapping, did telecom work, did wind turbine inspections. If you're thinking about, I would say don't quit your other job and just dive
Yeah.
into this. You need to have a developed business plan of where do you think you can make connections and have some proficiency and find a way to test that. Can I make connections and have a business flow? Building a business is more than just being highly skilled in something. So you have to promote, you have to sell, you have to find customers who need what you're offering. So I would put a business plan together, put it in, put everything in writing. This is my plan. Find some people in the industry. I find some people, they're not really salespeople. They don't promote things. It's just not natural to their personality. If you're going to start your own business, there's some challenges in that. You got to define that niche, promote it. So when I meet people, I actually look at what is their skill set and what fits with their personality. So I've just trained two other people, and one of them here is working doing doing data capture full time now for our power companies here in our state. Actually, he goes nationwide for one of the bigger asset owners in the power generation industry. And another one I just trained in drone and mapping skills. He just got hired locally here in Illinois to do some of those things. And I think that was a good fit for them. They've learned enough. So for some people, if maybe you don't do this full time, you can get your Part 107, learn about it. Maybe you still go into software or engineering and you're one of those people who brings integration. But I think it'd be good to look at, what do I want to be doing long term? And to be realistic about, I'm not trying to be offensive, but there is a romantic thing of, oh, I'll go out and fly all the time and that'll be fun, and it's not always fun. I did data capture here in Chicago for AT&T in January and February. That was not fun. All the gates are snowed in. You're shoveling those out. The locks are frozen, thawing them out with a torch. Oh, I'll be flying a drone. Oh, it'd be great. I go, no, no, I got a shovel in the back of my car. I got snow in my boots. I'm going, this is not as romantic as I thought.
I'm right there with you. I tell
We were free. Yeah, we froze to death. Yeah,
telecom is not fun. It's not. I mean, it's you
but
quit every week.
but
That's what I did.
yeah, yeah. But and so I think I think telecom can be
Mhm.
better in the team environment if the company has a good corporate culture where one team, it's important. I mean, some telecom companies are struggling to get enough
Mhm.
technicians. And if you're providing data, you think about how much we use our phones for so many things. We're dependent on this
Yeah.
working. So I think it's important work. And so I think it can find a place for that. But yeah, I think it's easy to not understand the grind of building your own business. So I'm recommending that people look at their skill set, what comes naturally
Mhm.
to them, what do they want to be doing long term.
Yep.
And so I find people who have the entrepreneurial view to build their own business, not everyone that's in the cards for them,
Yeah.
you know. So kind of take that inventory. If you have some friends or that are entrepreneurial, meet with them. Hey, I want to do
Yeah.
this, you know, and not to discourage anyone. I want to be in a rock band, right? I want to be in a rock band or I want to be an actor. Right? That's a limited number of people who get to do
Yeah.
that, you know. And yeah, so
Very true. Yeah.
or I want to start a successful restaurant. A lot of hard work to do
Yeah.
that. It's not just making good food. So anyway, so that's I can go on tangents with that, but I think there's a lot of places to go into. But I think for a lot of people, boy, look at that systems integration, learn enough, do learn a lot about the telecom industry, and you could say, do I want to be doing this for 10 years? You can go into engineering for telecom work, engineering towers, structures, integrating that into client sites, all types of places you can go.
And one of the funny thing about that specifically is there is a lot of telecom work. I do know that I've been talking to a lot of these different vendors and things like that about it. So they are looking for pilots. And one of my students was talking to me about it a couple days ago. And I told him, I was like, well, you have two ways. You can be a 1099 contractor and do that, or hear me out, go to these companies and work, on the ground floor and start getting in with these different companies because they're so immature at this point to where there's gonna be a lot of opportunities over the next few years. So if you can be that guy and start to really, be immersed in that industry, I bet you can really start making a name for yourself with those different companies. So there's different ways of looking at it. But as far as the grind part, it's actually really funny. So my class that I'm doing right now at Francis Tuttle, yesterday was the first day we did a full ground control mission with georeference data. And, I'm sure you've done plenty of it, but we got the base station out. It took them 30 minutes to get it level, right? And they're like, oh, this sucks. Yeah, welcome, right? And then they're going out there. We only did probably, it was maybe I think 6 acres of an area, and going out there and laying all the ground control points and lugging everything around your rover and getting all this set up. And it was hot and the sun was beating on you the whole time. And they're like, man, I need to bring water next time. Yeah, you probably should. And you're going out there, and I'm like, all right, guys. So we just set ground control for the last 2 hours. Now we're gonna do a 10-minute flight, and now we're gonna go pick up all the ground control. Welcome to being a drone pilot. It's like you only do 10 minutes of flight, and the rest of it is all the other stuff leading up to it. So it's just, I think they're starting to
Right.
get it.
Yeah, and I think the learning process of if you're going to integrate some of those technologies, it's a great entry
Mm-hmm.
point because you need to learn enough to understand what it's all doing. And so how do you learn that? That's one of the best ways to do it. So I would say my encouragement in mentored learning is, hey, don't be afraid of diving in and learning all those things by doing it. I'm finding some people who just hear about it, they don't understand it enough on how to build a good to actually work in that industry. The people who've done it,
Mm-hmm.
they understand
Yep.
that. Yeah,
I'm actually
yeah,
another
yep,
situation as well. One of my buddies, a roofer, and I told him, I'm like, I'm trying to learn this roofing industry because I see there's a lot of potential. So he
yeah,
has my number, and I was like, your next roofing project, you let me know because I want to get on that roof, and I will work for free for you. I want to learn your
yeah.
industry and put me through the ringer, right? I
Right.
want to get on that roof, and I want to be involved in this so I can really understand all the different challenges and things like that. So don't be afraid to get your
Yeah, and
foot. Yeah,
I'll give you
yeah, go
another
for it.
Yeah, I'll give you another crazy example. This building, the church building, has had some additions put on it. It's about not that big. It's
Uh-huh.
11,000 square feet, but it has a bell tower and it has a stack, an exhaust stack for the boiler and the hot water heater and for the building. But it's an old building, so it needed some tuck pointing, and we were trying to figure out the condition on the back side of the stack if I needed to get a lift big enough to reach the back side, but you can't see it from the ground.
Yeah.
Great solution for a drone. So I did a facade capture of the entire building, and I can see all the mortar joints, without having, okay, so I know from looking at the drone pictures, I can work with the tuck pointing company to say, okay, here's where we need to be on the building. And can I get by with a 60-foot lift, or do I need an 80-foot to reach around? Can I get to these areas where we want
Mhm.
you to go? You know what I mean? So yeah, again, we're using the tool to help plan our work,
Yeah,
to plan the actual execution of the work. So I think, yeah,
makes sense.
samples.
I love it. Yeah, this is
Mhm.
great. Speaking of that, do you think there are any specific skills that are necessary for drone pilots going forward? I know you mentioned some of them. Do you have anything specifically that you're like, if you're going to become a drone pilot, this is something else you should also learn, and they're just basically hand in hand?
What I've seen is, well, bigger companies can struggle with this. You have some, I don't know if we call it AI, but a lot of automated functions that enter in. It helps if you're really interested in it. If it's just a job or another tool, you're not going to dive in and learn it as well. So it helps if you have a true interest in it. Or if you think, well, it's kind of cool, but I might move on, because there's a lot to learn if you're going to develop a drone program and do that. And I would say if you're going to work for a company, put it on your resume, get your Part 107, and if you really like it, you might even look at your local power company or your local water company or your local Department of Transportation and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. It's very helpful for them to have people who want to use the technology. And that's what I've seen with big companies. I trained out at another company in California, and their pilots were super involved. And it can be hard if hey, this is your job. Here's one of your tools. You have to do this. If the person, guy or lady, doesn't want to do it, it doesn't work as well. And so as you develop your drone program, if you find people who are interested and want to use the technology, it's super helpful. So
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
so yeah, I think for a lot of people, add that to your resume, get your Part 107, learn how to fly, learn about mapping. You can do that all on your own if you have some initiative, and it might help you get hired in a regular job. Maybe it's not your full-time thing, but you can say, I know how this works and I want to be involved in that. And oh yeah, it could be a huge resume builder. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what helped the last person I trained get hired. He had done some mapping with me, and the mapping he'd done with me was more advanced than the company executives had heard of. And they go, oh, that's good. Come on with us, and we'll use that, because they wanted to do volumetric measurement, which is a pretty well developed
sure.
technology in the drone industry, and say, yeah, come help us figure that out. So yeah.
Yeah, I had a conversation with, so we're trying to partner with survey firms in the area because obviously if we're making pilots who are able to do survey work for surveyors, clearly the next step is we want to find surveyors that want to work with us. So that's obviously the partnership. So I'm trying to reach out and just calling people up and saying, hey, let's have that conversation. And it was interesting because one survey firm literally told me, oh, we don't know how to use drones. Like that's legitimate. They're
Right.
like, we want to use it. We don't know how. I'm like, all right, hear me out.
Right.
I have people who now know how to use drones and can work for you. They're like,
I
oh,
Yeah, I actually did a project not far from here. They were building three of the Amazon style
yeah,
warehouses. I won't tell you the town, but here in the
sure.
suburbs, because we have so much distribution here. But the survey company had their own drones. So we would compare volumetric measurement from what I got and from what they were doing. They had much more expensive equipment. And this is where we learned the flight profile is more important than the equipment.
Yep, right there with you.
Yeah, so develop a flight profile that consistently gives you good
Mhm.
data, and we can help you with
Yeah,
that.
that
Yeah. Yeah, but we can save you from that iteration. This didn't work. Let's go higher. Let's go lower, and yeah. So yeah.
exactly. And I like that. It's the iteration. It's like people who are experienced in this industry, like yourself, obviously, right? You can
Yep.
go and really help a company get from where they are now to where they need to be. And it can save so
Right.
much time, money, resources.
Right.
Like, I mean, and look at all the different opportunities they're going to be missing out on as well as like it's like I know like the embarrassment of not having it correctly, right? Going to a client and producing data incorrectly that's not generating the right results. Like all of these things are what you can avoid by having someone who's actually qualified.
Well,
Yeah.
and if you look, a lot of these companies only have so many technical specialists,
Mhm.
and they just they really they can't afford to have their time not well
Yep.
utilized. And so we're trying to help. We come in and we can help you be more effective and efficient. That, you have some people who are very good at what they do, but you can't afford to have their time not be effective. So let us help you develop this, that when they go out, they get
Yep,
good data.
I'm sure
Yeah.
you've heard I'm sure you've heard the little like the story. I'm sure it's fake, but whatever. Of like where there was a piece of machinery that wasn't working correctly, and some guy go over there hit it with a hammer, and they
Yeah.
give him a huge bill. They're like, "What is the bill for?" He's like, "Well,
Yeah.
$1 for the
Yeah.
hammer, $9,000 for the experience of knowing where to hit." So
Right.
I mean, and that's the
And
important
some of
thing.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah, some of it's still in develop. Like a bridge capture is a good opportunity. Different style bridges. What type of capture is going to give us good data? That's being developed.
It,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
makes sense. So what are the specific industries and different like applications that you feel like the most comfortable working with? Anything specifically?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed working with the police and fire departments with some of the new thermal cameras for security and the ability to have an asset and a tool that helps to cover an area, even search and rescue,
Yeah.
right? So to have a tool that you've got with you that you can put out if you need it, I've enjoyed doing that. I think that's really that technology just it's such a big help when they need it. Sometimes they're doing the work of putting out the fire or doing something else, but they've got another tool they can use. I would say my preference is to adapt the technology for power companies and construction companies and service companies. And engineering companies. Let's help you take this tool and gather data that helps you engineer, analyze, inspect your equipment more quickly and more efficiently, and have a record,
Yes.
of what's there.
Hmm.
I have a permanent record. I have a permanent 3D model. We looked at that 4 months ago. I can't remember. Boom,
Exactly.
it comes up. And so that the data is useful. Yeah, so I think the ability to do that, I would really enjoy diving in with a customer. Let's help make this work for you in your work environment, not and I do a fair amount of classroom. You get a new drone, it's reasonably complicated if you've never picked it up. We want you to know how everything works. Now let's take it and go use it.
That it makes so much sense. And it's actually funny you mentioned the public safety aspect. I had a conversation with a local police chief out here, and they bought new equipment. They don't know how to use it. And he was like, "Well, if we have a situation, we'll call you." I'm like, "What do you expect me to do at that point?" I'm like, it's the now is when you learn how to use the equipment the right way, because when you need that
Right,
drone, it's too late. Like I can't go out there and train your guys on site. It's being proactive. It's having, and like you were talking about
right,
the lidar scanner and stuff. One of the things that we're communicating with them is actually having a full 3D model of all their different assets that are like major critical assets in the area. Like, and I know it sucks to talk about, but like, in some sort of an active shooter situation and things like that, like having those models ahead of time and knowing what your infrastructure looks like, you can just pull it up and reference it, and you can have full command and control for public safety. There's so many things that you can do with that, but if you don't
yeah,
do the work ahead of time, it's not going to be useful when you actually need that data.
right. And we're working with customers. Sometimes it's difficult to schedule. You've got these people who are busy and they're your technical specialists. Boom, the storm happens. Power company. I can't do it this week. All our people are out, and so we'll work with you and help do
Yep.
that. We understand that.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's a good time to look at the equipment and can this
Mhm.
help us because it's much easier than it used to be. Where before you had to be a bit of a savant and an enthusiast for it to go well. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? Otherwise, it was a mess.
I've recognized that it's never a priority until it happens, and then all of a sudden it's everyone's priority. So it's like, everyone's very reactive. A lot of situations are very reactive, and then as soon as you have an issue, all of a sudden that is the biggest priority. So it's just like, going in there and building the infrastructure correctly, learning how to do it correctly, building the proper, SOPs, TTPs, and really building that out, and doing it ahead of time is going to be it's going to save you so much in the future when you actually do need that information. So, but yeah, huge opportunity, especially in the public safety sector. I've definitely seen it a lot. A lot of those conversations are very interesting on that part. But getting the actionable insights into the engineering, the construction, all the things you were talking about, huge. And those are a lot of no fail things. Like you can't, if you don't do it correctly the first time, it can have serious impact in the future. And so make sure you're doing it correctly. But yeah, perfect.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and there's probably more than one way to do things, but you want to do it so it's efficient and you're getting information that's useful for your
Hmm.
teams. That's where we're trying to help you identify how do we do that with the technology that exists
Of
now.
course.
So
Yep. And like you said as well, the asset management side of being able to go back and look at previous records, incredibly valuable. It really is.
yeah.
It absolutely is. And
Who can remember? Yeah, yeah. Even I was doing a construction site, another warehouse near Shanahan. That's a little kind of a town, maybe an hour out from Chicago. But a pipeline company came through and dug a trench and put a pipeline not too far from the warehouse. He said, "Hey, can you map this so we know exactly where this is in relation to our warehouse, the underground portion?" So we did. I was mapping it once a month anyway, or twice a month. But I went out and boom, they have a permanent record of where the underground is. Who's going to remember 3 years from now?
exactly.
So yeah.
Yep. 100%. Well, Dean, I cannot stress enough. This has been incredibly valuable. I really do appreciate it. I know that the viewers on
Sure.
this channel are going to get an extreme amount of value out of this. So where can people reach you at? And obviously, I'm going to give you a last little final remark. Anything you want to talk about?
I would say go to my new website,
It will be up
which is
soon.
focused on training. Yeah, well, it's up, but it's just not that populated yet. So it's with data. It's uasflight.com. Go there. And my other one is my website that has more data is fasterpass.com. But go there. My contact information is there. If we can help you out, we'd love to connect. But yeah, usflight.com.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, so you can reach out to me there.
Okay,
So
awesome. Well, hey, Dean, I cannot stress enough. Thank you so much for everything. And I hope we do this again. I really do.
yeah, it'll be fun.
Awesome, my
Good to
friend.
connect with you, Chris.
Yeah, you as well. All right.